Hey guys, tonight we're walking barefoot into the damp clay world of the Shang Dynasty, where turtle shells whisper secrets, bones carry questions, and the village diviner is definitely the most interesting person no one dares to sit next to. You'll be part of this mystery tonight, and don't worry, I'll be right here, gently narrating and trying not to make jokes about prehistoric weather forecasting. Too often, just a heads up though, you probably wouldn't survive this era. No clean water, no bug spray, no Tylenol. One bad oyster and you're being respectfully buried under your uncle's barley field with a commemorative chicken. Still, it's cozy in its own way, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing where in the world people are dozing off to ancient metaphysics and mollusks. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive just before dawn, barefoot, wrapped in a rough linen robe that smells like smoke and wild rice. The air is thick and pale, the sky still smudged with stars that haven't gotten the message to leave. You're at the edge of a Shang settlement. No gates, no guards, just a soft slope of earth that leads into a clustered village of reed-thatched rooftops and smoldering hearths. There's no loud welcome here, no trumpets. Just a slow, steady hum of morning things. Broom bristles against stone, water sloshing from a low well, a chicken sounding off like it has opinions about grain pricing. The ground beneath your feet is packed dirt, cool and a little damp. It remembers the steps of those who passed through yesterday, and the day before, and hundreds of yesterdays before that. This village has a memory. You pass a small shrine first, low to the ground, with a crooked offering bowl and a fresh clump of wildflowers laid beside it. You resist the urge to straighten the bowl. It's not your job. And also, the last person who tried that now has suspiciously excellent crops and a limp no one mentions. The homes are humble, wattle and daub with sweeping eaves. The scent of toasted grain floats lazily from one of them. Someone coughs. A dog stretches, yawns, and gives you the look of someone who's decided not to bark unless absolutely necessary. You step past a pen of sleepy pigs and approach what might be a village square, or at least the widest flat area not taken up by vegetables or compost. A few market stalls are still half covered, their wares hidden beneath bundles of straw and waxed cloth. A boy runs by with something in his arms. It's either a very small goat or a very spirited sack of beans. And you, for some reason, are here. Not just as a visitor, but as someone the villagers are expecting. You feel it in the way a woman pauses at her grinding stone to glance at you. Not unkindly, just curious. Measured, like she's trying to decide whether you're the kind of person who could talk to bones. The wind shifts. It smells like river silt and fresh-cut bamboo. There's a current in the air, something anticipatory. Like the village itself is holding its breath. And there's one word whispered softly from hut to path to stall, whether the rains haven't come yet, but they're supposed to. You notice small details now. Bundles of millet stacked higher than usual, roof thatching reinforced with extra reeds. Even the dogs seem to be staying closer to home. A group of elders sits in a tight circle, shelling beans into a cracked bowl and muttering with the slow rhythm of people who have said the same things 1,000 times before. One of them looks up and says something under their breath. You don't catch the words, but the tone is unmistakable. The diviner's waiting, your feet move before your brain does. Down a narrower path now, between two groves of whispering bamboo. The sun is starting to rise just barely, turning the mist gold at the edges. It glows around you like a lantern held in the palm of the morning. You pass a turtle, not a pet, not quite wild. Just there. Sitting near a pond, blinking at you with the serene, unhurried stare of a creature that knows its ancestors are about to become office supplies. You nod to it. Respectfully, at the far end of the path, tucked near a tall tree with wide-reaching limbs, is a modest hut. The roof is layered thick with reeds and the walls are smudged with soot and ash. This is not a house, it's a workshop, a sacred space. A place where questions are carved into bone and fire replies with cracks. You step up to the threshold. Inside, it's dim and smoky. There's a faint scent of incense, charcoal, and ink. On the floor, bundles of ox scapulae, a few plastrons, turtle shells, neatly arranged by size. Along the walls, markings, symbols painted with careful fingers and fading pigment. You can't read them, you don't have to. The room reads you, and then a voice, not a dramatic one, just quiet. Calm, tired maybe, but kind. "You're here," it says. You look toward the corner, and there, seated cross-legged on a mat of woven rushes, is the village diviner. His hair is wild in that deliberate way, like he either hasn't seen a comb in a year or has transcended the need for one. His robe is stained with soot, his hands ink-smudged and worn, but his eyes, those are awake. Ancient and young at the same time, like he's been waiting all night just to explain something the wind has been too shy to say. "You're the one they chose," he says, smiling crookedly. "Or the one who showed up. Either way, we begin." You don't argue, because somehow you already knew this was where the day would take you. The diviner doesn't rise. He just pats the mat beside him, and you lower yourself onto it, the woven fibers creaking gently beneath your weight. You sit cross-legged like he is, and he nods with a quiet satisfaction that makes you feel like you've already passed some kind of test just by not sitting on a sacred ink stone. He doesn't speak right away. Just lets the silence settle between you like dust. Then he reaches over to a small bundle wrapped in dark cloth and carefully unwraps it. Inside is a single turtle shell, clean, pale, slightly curved, and worn smooth on the outer side. The underside, though, is marked. It's not writing, not quite, but it's not random either. A series of fine scratches radiate from the center of the plastron like cracks in ice, arranged with the quiet intention of someone who asks serious questions in a serious way. You lean in to see. "This one asked about a drought," the diviner says softly. "2 summers ago, it cracked wide. Right through the center." You squint, tracing a long, dark fissure. "Did it rain?" He shrugs. "A little, but the millet was angry about it." You try to figure out whether that's literal or poetic. He doesn't clarify. That might be a recurring theme. You look around the room more carefully now. Bundles of bamboo brushes hang neatly from one post. A shallow dish of black ink sits covered with a leaf. Bones, some turtle, some ox, are stacked along one shelf, not cluttered, not chaotic, just lived in. Like the kind of place where you wouldn't be surprised to find a spirit napping behind the curtain. You ask if people bring offerings. The diviner nods. "Dried fish, clay pots. Once someone brought me a peach with a face drawn on it. I think it was supposed to represent an ancestor. But it got moldy, so I released it back to the garden." You almost laugh. He doesn't. Then again, his face does that kind of stillness where it's hard to tell if he's joking or communing with a ghost, possibly both. Outside, the morning is picking up pace. You hear footsteps, carts, a distant child wailing because someone gave them the wrong stick. But in here, time folds in on itself. It's quiet, focused, the kind of space where questions feel safe. You touch one of the turtle shells gently, as if it might whisper something if you hold your breath long enough. "You know how they're chosen?" he asks you suddenly. You blink. "The shells," he shakes his head. "The questions." You admit that you don't. He gestures vaguely. "Sometimes it's the king. Sometimes the village. Sometimes the weather asks first. You just learn to listen. It's always been that way." One confirmed fact. The Shang people believed in communicating with ancestors through divination, especially about important matters: rainfall, crop success, battles, childbirth, even dreams. And sometimes, not so important matters, like whether moving the altar 3 inches to the left would improve soup quality. That last one is speculative, but you wouldn't be surprised. You rise and follow the diviner as he motions you toward the door. Outside, the mist has lifted slightly, revealing more of the village in the soft morning light. Smoke trails curl from chimneys. A woman carries a basket of greens across the square. You smell steamed rice, damp wood, and a hint of cinnamon, or something very cinnamon adjacent. He leads you through the narrow paths between huts, moving slowly, almost absent-mindedly. People step aside for him, offering quiet nods. Some glance at you, their expressions unreadable. You wonder what they think of you, this quiet shadow trailing the village's strangest elder. You pass by a low building with a stone threshold and a wide doorway covered in carved wooden slats. It hums with energy. Inside are rows of stored bones, bundled scrolls, stacked tablets, some burned, some cracked, all meticulously placed. Records, the diviner says simply. Some of the oldest. You're struck by that. The idea that somewhere in those piles is a question someone asked centuries ago, maybe about the same weather, maybe about this very week, maybe about you. Do the ancestors ever answer with jokes, you ask? He gives a dry chuckle. Once I asked if I should replace my sandals. The shell cracked sideways like a mouth. Then it rained for 3 days straight. I took that as a yes. The two of you arrive at a clearing near the edge of the village where a small pen holds 3 turtles. They're quiet, naturally. Mostly still, save for one that's very slowly trying to climb onto another for reasons that may or may not be spiritual. He gestures toward them. Pick one. You hesitate. Go on, he says. They usually know who they're going with. You crouch, eyeing the 3. One is large and stern. One is asleep with its legs flopped dramatically to the sides. The third stares at you with that inscrutable turtle look, then sneezes. You take that one. The diviner nods. Good choice, spirited, probably opinionated. You cradle the turtle in your hands. Its shell is warm, alive. You feel the subtle texture of it, small ridges, slight imperfections, faint marks from a long, slow life. You look up. The wind shifts again, bringing with it the scent of damp earth and river grass. The clouds overhead seem lower now, heavier. The diviner watches the sky for a long moment. Then he turns to you and says, "We'll start the fire soon." You don't ask what that means. You already know it's the next step. You carry the turtle like a gift, like a puzzle, like a very slow friend who doesn't know yet that they're about to become famous. It blinks once at you, then resumes being deeply indifferent. Turtles, you're learning, are excellent at neutrality. The diviner walks ahead, silent now, hands tucked into his wide sleeves as if he's holding a secret. The sky above has lightened, but not by much. The kind of light that makes everything look like it's been painted in rice water and regret. You follow him back toward the workshop, retracing the path past the sleepy pigs, the shrine that's still slightly crooked, and the boy who is now definitely carrying a goat and not a sack of beans. Inside, the space is the same but also different. There's a stillness now. An attention. Like the air itself is ready to participate. The diviner kneels beside the hearth and begins to build a fire. He doesn't rush. Every twig, every dried leaf placed with the kind of care usually reserved for unwrapping ancient scrolls or removing a very stubborn splinter from someone you love. You sit beside him, turtle still in hand, and ask, "Is this part sacred too?" "All of it is," he says. "Even the mistakes." The fire crackles to life with a gentle puff, like a sigh that's waited all night to be let out. Smoke rises in a thin, gray ribbon and coils toward the smoke hole above. The room darkens slightly as the fire brightens, and your turtle, now on a reed mat beside you, does what turtles do best: nothing at all. The diviner reaches for a small bowl and removes a piece of chalky ash. With the flat side, he begins to rub the inside of the turtle shell, carefully cleaning away any dirt, moss, or memory it might still carry. "You must start clean," he murmurs, "or the answer will be cloudy. This is where the work begins." You kneel beside him and take the cleaned plastron in your hands. It's smooth now, the pale surface dotted with tiny imperfections, subtle dips, the legacy of an animal that once paddled through muddy ponds without knowing it would become a forecast model. "Now," the diviner says, placing a thin sliver of sharpened bone into your hand. "Your first question," you blink. "Me," he nods. "It's your turtle. It should hear your question." You hesitate. What can you ask? There's the obvious, will it rain? But that seems too expected, too grown up. Instead, you ask softly, "Will the village be safe this week?" The diviner doesn't laugh, doesn't correct you. He simply nods, satisfied. You scratch the question into the underside of the shell, not in characters, but in soft marks. A symbol for the village, a swirl for rain, a dot for time. You're not fluent in this language, but it's okay. The question knows what it means. Historians still wonder, the diviner says as he watches you, whether we carved true writing or something simpler. Symbols, spirits, feelings even, he pauses. But you feel it, don't you? You do. Because even though no one would call it writing in a modern sense, it feels like language. A kind of whispering your hands understand. When the markings are finished, the diviner places the shell on a raised clay stand near the fire. Beside it lies a thin rod, slightly curved, darkened with use. This is the poker, he says, like he's introducing a shy cousin. He holds it in the flames until it glows faintly, then presses it gently to one of the shell's carved spots. There's a pop. A crack splits across the shell with a tiny sound, sharp and immediate. The air tightens. You feel it in your teeth. The diviner lifts the poker again, moves to another mark, presses, waits, crack. Another line appears, this one branching like lightning through bone. You stare at it, heart fluttering. Not from fear, from awe. The turtle shell, so calm, so still, is speaking. The diviner sits back on his heels. This is how we hear the will of heaven, he says. Through what breaks, you lean closer. The cracks are not random, not exactly. One curls toward the center. One veers left, jagged. Another forks like a path split in two. You look at the diviner, expectant. He studies the shell for a long moment, then he traces one crack with his finger. This one says the rains will come from the northeast, not heavy, not yet, but soon. He moves to another. This says the river will not overflow, the spirits are watching it, and it is behaving. Then he smiles. This one, though, he pauses. This one says a dog will eat something it regrets. You blink, he shrugs. The shells can be chatty. You both sit quietly for a moment, the fire crackling beside you. The turtle continues to do nothing, which is becoming its signature move. You ask. Do the cracks always speak this clearly? The diviner chuckles. Only when you're not looking for answers. That doesn't make total sense, but also somehow does. One little known fact. Some Shang diviners would record both the question and the outcome, not always, but often, on bones, on bamboo. Sometimes just told in story form, passed down through generations of quiet guesswork and faith. You help move the shell to a shallow tray where it will cool. The marks are still visible, now more than just lines. They're tiny histories. You glance out the doorway. The sky has shifted, still gray but lighter now, and streaked with pale blue veins like it too is cracking. Come, the diviner says. Let's walk while the sky is honest. You gather the shell, wrap it in cloth, and step back into the day, the scent of smoke clinging gently to your robe. The turtle, mercifully, is not required for the walk and is left behind with what you assume are kind parting words. You follow your teacher down a narrow path lined with reeds and low walls. The village murmurs around you, unaware that a question has just been asked, and an answer may be given. And somehow, the silence feels a little more alive. The diviner walks ahead of you with the kind of gait that suggests he knows exactly where he's going, but also wouldn't mind stopping halfway there to have a philosophical conversation with a mossy rock. His robe rustles gently as he walks, brushing the tops of low grasses still wet with morning. You carry the wrapped shell in your hands like a letter you're not finished reading. The path winds through the village outskirts, past a field where two women are staking bean vines with the efficiency of people who have done this 100 times and will do it 100 more. One of them waves at the diviner. He waves back with the solemnity of a man who once told her not to plant too close to the ditch and was, unfortunately, right. You follow him past a cluster of bamboo stands and up a slight incline that opens into a broad view of the surrounding land. Below, the river snakes through the valley like it's thinking about misbehaving but hasn't fully committed yet. To the east, low hills swell gently under the heavy sky, and just to the west, the village stretches, huts and hearths and tiny carts that look like lazy insects from this distance. The diviner settles himself on a flat rock with the air of someone who has absolutely claimed this particular spot for years. You sit beside him, careful not to crush any wildflowers, which would feel like a bad omen for reasons you can't quite explain. Most people think we ask the shells for yes or no, he says, not looking at you, but that's not really how it works. You wait. The shell cracks where it wants, we interpret. Sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's interpretive dance with punctuation. You try to imagine a turtle shell doing interpretive dance and immediately regret the mental image. So, you ask, what happens if the shell lies? He smiles faintly. Ah, now that's a useful question. A breeze brushes across your face. It smells like river mist and distant mint leaves. There's a saying, he continues. The bones speak the truth, but sometimes the truth changes overnight. You frown. So the answer's not wrong, just outdated. Exactly. Like predicting sunny skies and then waking up to a goose in your doorway and thunder in your ears. You nod as if this is a common experience. He takes a deep breath and glances at the wrapped shell in your lap. Keep it. The first shell you read should stay with you. You blink. What for? In case it speaks again. You don't ask how a cracked turtle shell might spontaneously offer follow-up commentary. You just accept it. As the morning warms, the diviner pulls a small pouch from inside his robe and offers you something round and pale. Dried plum. For the journey back. You take it, grateful, and bite in. It's sharp, tangy, and just sweet enough to feel like a reward for having not dropped the shell earlier. You ask him how long he's been divining. He thinks for a moment. Since I was old enough to be wrong and still listened. Not exactly a number, but it makes sense. He tells you about his teacher, a woman with one eye and a walking stick carved with snakes. She used to say, if a bone answers too fast, ask it again when it's sleepy. You smile, one lesser-known fact. While most diviners were male in Shang records, some women practiced bone divination, especially in family settings or among elite priestesses. The written record may be sparse, but the oral history whispers. You both sit quietly for a while. Below, a heron lifts off from the riverbank and glides low over the water. Its wings stretch impossibly wide, silent except for the sound they don't make. The clouds shift again, not darker, just thicker. You think it will rain, you ask. The diviner shrugs. The shell said yes. The wind says maybe. My knees say soon. You laugh gently. A moment passes, then another. Then he says something that stops your thoughts mid-step. Sometimes I wonder if the ancestors get tired of answering. You look over at him. I mean, it's been centuries. We keep asking the same things. Will it rain? Will the millet grow? Should I propose marriage to the woman who grows cucumbers on the southern slope? He leans back on his elbows. Maybe they're just being polite. Maybe they're rolling their ancient eyes. Do they ever stop answering? You ask. His voice drops. That's the part no one wants to admit. Sometimes they go quiet. You both fall into stillness again, and the breeze seems to pull the weight of that sentence into the sky. Then, the sound of distant bells, not ceremonial, just from the goat pen. Someone's tying them again. But still, it feels like punctuation. The kind of sound that tells you it's time to move on. The diviner stands slowly, stretches, brushes a stray leaf from his sleeve. You do the same, the shell wrapped safely under your arm, a dried plum pit still tucked in your cheek like a secret. Come. He says, let's get back before the sun pretends it knows what it's doing. You both walk back down the hill, feet brushing through wild grass and soft earth. The clouds overhead continue to gather, very slowly. And for the first time, you realize you're watching them not with worry, but with a kind of quiet curiosity. As if, should it rain, you'll know exactly who to thank. The sun hasn't disappeared. It's just taken on a softer role, more glow than shine. It peeks between the clouds now and then, like someone peeking into a quiet room to check if you're still napping. You walk with the diviner back through the village, and everything feels just slightly different. Not in the dramatic, music-swelling kind of way, just quieter, more aware. Like someone turned up the volume on the details, you notice that the scent of steaming grain is heavier now. That someone nearby is grinding spices, and you catch a sharp tickle of something peppery. You pass a child building a tiny hut out of sticks and spitting very determined orders at a clay chicken. The world moves on while questions are asked. And the questions, you realize, are stitched into it all. Back inside the workshop, the fire has burned down to a bed of soft orange coals. The diviner doesn't rekindle it. He just nods at the warmth and leaves it to rest. He leads you to a low table covered in tools, brushes, bone shards, inkstones. There's a stone bowl of water, clear as glass, and beside it, a clean plastron, pale, unmarked, waiting. Now, he says. You learn how to prepare one. You sit beside him, and he hands you a smooth stone the size of your palm. First, polish, he says. Remove the memory. You gently rub the surface of the shell, working the stone in slow, circular motions. It's like sanding down a question before it's asked. You feel the fine grit of the shell under your fingers, the small vibrations in your wrist. It's oddly calming, meditative, like convincing a surface to forget everything it once knew so it can listen again. When the polishing is done, he passes you a brush and a dish of ink made from soot and water. The brush is surprisingly light. The bristles curve slightly like they're already bowing toward the surface. You pause. Do I write my question? No, he says. You draw its shape. That makes exactly as much sense as anything else in your day so far. You think about what's being asked, not just whether it will rain or whether the river will behave. You think about the feeling of uncertainty, of hope with its hands in its pockets. You dip the brush in ink and begin to draw. A swirl, a line, a curve that feels like movement. You don't know what it means exactly, but when you look up, the diviner nods. Good, you didn't try too hard. He smiles faintly. The ancestors don't like try-hards. You set the shell aside to dry. Next comes the etching. He shows you how to carve shallow pits into the underside of the plastron, small, precise spots where the heat will be applied. If the spot is too deep, the crack will be impatient, he warns. If it's too shallow, it won't speak at all. You try. The tool is sharp, the shell resistant. It's like trying to persuade a stubborn idea to become a sentence. When you're finished, you have 4 pits, each one tied to a part of your drawn question. The diviner examines them and murmurs his approval. He lights a smaller fire now, just for the ceremony. This one's controlled, focused. The flames are slow and sure, like they've done this before. He hands you the poker. You hesitate. Don't overthink it, he says. It's not a science, it's a conversation. You heat the poker, feeling the warmth through the handle. The glow builds slowly, softly. Then, with a small breath, you press it to the first pit. Crack. It's a tiny sound, but it splits the air like the pop of a seed becoming something new. A line curls away from the pit like a question answering itself in the dark. You try again. Crack and again. Crack. By the 4th, your hands are shaking slightly, not from fear, but from reverence. The shell now holds a map of uncertainty, traced in fire. The diviner takes the shell and examines it like a midwife reading the face of a newborn. This one, he says, tracing a long arc, suggests movement from the west, water, but slow. He nods, not a flood, a warning. He turns it in his hands. This one is unclear, could mean delay, could mean someone's not ready. He looks up at you. You want to say yes, but the word doesn't quite land. You're not sure what you're preparing for. Rain, understanding, the realization that a cracked turtle shell might hold more insight than your entire extended family. I think so, you say. He accepts this, and then comes the final step, recording. He takes out a small bamboo slip and a thin stylus. On it he scratches a brief note. Your name. The date, the question in shapes and summary. The answer in guesswork and grace. He slides the slip into a woven pouch and places the shell inside, wrapping them like a bundle of sleeping thoughts. You sit quietly, watching the fire fade to coal. One lesser-known detail. Some Shang diviners kept entire collections of oracle bones grouped by theme. Rains, crops, illness, dreams, even awkward family disputes. It was part prophecy, part diary, part weather report. You wonder what your entry will be grouped under. The diviner stretches, sighs, and says, you did well, you didn't rush, you smile. You said I shouldn't try too hard. True, he says, but that's different from not trying at all. Outside, the light has shifted again. That late afternoon warmth, the golden hush before dusk. It pools at the threshold like it's waiting to be let in. You place the shell bundle on the table. The question is finished, but you're just beginning. The light outside has gone syrupy and slow, that particular shade of amber that makes the entire world feel like it's being gently tucked in for the evening. You linger at the edge of the diviner's doorway, feeling the heat of the day begin to dissolve into something softer, quieter. Behind you, the fire lets out one final crack and settles into a gentle ember glow, as if it's also had enough excitement for one day. "Come," the diviner says, brushing ash from his sleeves. "Let's take the long path." The long path, it turns out, is a narrow foot trail that winds behind the village and slips between tall reed beds and groves of whispering trees. It's not much traveled, too winding for carts, too hidden for errands, but it carries the kind of calm that only paths with no destination can offer. You follow him in silence for a while. The sounds of the village fade behind you, replaced by rustling leaves and the distant burble of a sleepy stream. The air here is cooler, and the diviner walks more slowly now, hands behind his back like someone waiting for a poem to show up. "Do you ever ask the bones about yourself?" you ask eventually. He glances at you, amused. "Of course, who doesn't? You hadn't expected that answer." "And do they answer?" He shrugs. "Sometimes. Sometimes they answer a different question entirely. One I didn't know I was asking." You step over a gnarled root. "What if the bones are wrong?" "That's the trick," he says. "The bones are never wrong. We just ask the wrong things." You're quiet after that. There's a lot to process when you realize a piece of ancient shell might be better at conversations than most dinner guests. The path curves toward a clearing where tall stalks of millet sway gently in the breeze. The diviner stops here, gazing out across the fields with a look you can't quite read, part memory, part anticipation. "This," he says, gesturing toward the green waves of grain, "is why the shells matter." You look at the field. It's calm, peaceful, not threatening in the slightest. He seems to read your mind. It looks safe. It is safe until it isn't. One heavy rain, one night of wind, one stubborn cloud that refuses to move on. You nod slowly. "So it's not about control, it's about readiness." "Exactly," he says. "The shell doesn't stop the storm, it just lets us put the pot under the leak." You both stand for a while, watching the millet bend and straighten. It's a kind of choreography, each stalk moving like it has a part in a dance only the wind knows. You ask what happens if the shell doesn't crack. He smiles. Then the ancestors are either asleep or unimpressed. He kneels, picks up a small rock and tosses it gently into the brush. A lizard scampers out in a panic and dashes into the shadows. He chuckles softly. Not everything needs to be divine. Sometimes you just need a rock, a lesser-known fact. While the Shang ritualized divination, they also had a deep respect for natural omens, the flight of birds, the direction of animal footprints, even how certain crops leaned at dawn. Not everything required fire and bone. Sometimes the world answered with movement. You ask if people ever disagreed with the diviner's reading. "Oh, constantly," he says. "Usually by pretending they agreed, then doing the opposite. I once told a farmer not to plant before the new moon. He thanked me, then planted everything the next morning. It all drowned in a week of rain." He sighs, not smug, just quietly vindicated. You reach the edge of the field where a small shrine stands, just a carved stone and a ring of river pebbles. A few offerings rest at its base, a carved flute, a handful of dried beans, a tiny clay fish, someone's hopes left humbly. The diviner touches the stone gently, not praying, just greeting. "Sometimes I think the ancestors don't need us to ask," he says. "They already know. But asking is our way of remembering they're still listening." You sit down on the grass. It's cool, soft, with just enough bugs to remind you that you're not in a dream. The sun dips lower and everything turns golden. "What if," you say slowly, "the bones are just reflecting us?" "What we want to hear." He doesn't answer right away. Then he says, "Maybe. But even that has value. Sometimes the thing we most want to hear is the truth we're not ready to admit." You lie back, staring up at the sky, which is now layered in brushstrokes, blues and grays and the thinnest traces of apricot near the horizon. Above you, a bird glides across the open air, wings outstretched. It doesn't flap, it just drifts, letting the wind carry it. "I once asked the bones if I should leave," he says quietly. "A long time ago, and," they crack toward home. You glance over. His eyes are far away, like they're reading something invisible on the wind. The field breathes around you. The millet sways. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks once, as if giving its editorial opinion on everything. You sit up slowly. What happens if no one listens to the bones anymore? He chuckles. Then the bones get very well rested. You both laugh softly, and the world seems to pause just long enough for that sound to echo. Eventually, you rise, brush off your robe, and begin the walk back, the path behind you scattered with footprints and fallen petals. The diviner doesn't say anything more, but the silence feels full. Like a shell after the crack, still holding meaning, still listening. By the time you return to the village, the day is slipping gently into that late, golden hush, the one that only ever shows up when it's sure you'll notice. Shadows are longer now, stretching across clay walls and winding around low fences like sleepy cats. The turtle is still where you left it, naturally. It hasn't moved unless you count the micro-adjustment it made to face 15 degrees left, possibly in protest or in slow pursuit of a beetle. You give it a nod. Inside the workshop, the air is cooler. The fire has gone completely still, leaving only a few charcoal remnants that whisper warmth instead of showing it. The space is dim, but not dark, the kind of light that asks you to speak quietly and take your shoes off, even though you're already barefoot. The diviner kneels beside a stack of bones, some turtle, some ox, and begins gently rearranging them. Not for ceremony this time, for recording. You kneel beside him and take in the rows, polished, inscribed, labeled in faint strokes of ink or carved dots. Some bones are split wide, marked with questions about rain, harvests, births. Others are tiny, their inscriptions barely legible, but their meaning preserved with care. These, the diviner says, are our questions, not theirs. You blink. Whose? The ancestors, the spirits, the ones we talk to. He gestures at the bones. This is us talking, this is our half of the conversation. He hands you a slip of bamboo and a stylus. Write what you asked, what cracked, what was said. You hesitate, then begin. At first, the symbols feel clumsy. You aren't a trained scribe, and the ink seems determined to misbehave. But gradually, the rhythm comes. You record the day's reading, your question about the village safety, and the 3 cracks that formed, the soft arc, the branching vein, the one that pointed inward. When you finish, he takes it from your hands, studies it, then slides it into a basket beside others. Maybe one day, someone else will read it, wonder what kind of rain you were waiting for. You wonder quietly if you already know. As night edges closer, the diviner rises and lights a single lantern. Its glow flickers gently against the walls, making the bones cast long, stretched shadows that sway as if breathing. Come, he says, there's one more place. He leads you around the back of the workshop to a tiny room, more closet than chamber. Inside are shelves upon shelves of archived oracle bones, bundled neatly, their cracked surfaces glinting faintly in the lamplight. They look like an ancient filing system. One that stores anxiety, hope, and occasionally weather complaints. Some of the shells are larger than any you've seen. One is nearly blackened from age, the crack marks barely visible now, smoothed by 100 cautious fingers. These, he whispers, are the oldest we have. You move slowly between the shelves, reading the labels. Some carry dates, some carry symbols you don't recognize, maybe tribal emblems, family marks, or weather signs no longer used. You pause before one bundle tied with a red thread. The tag reads, "Dream of the East Wind." You look to the diviner, who just nods. That one was asked during the longest dry season in memory. The dream came from a child. They asked if the east wind would bring the rain. Did it? You whisper. He smiles. Eventually. You both sit there for a while, surrounded by centuries of questions. None of them erased, none of them discarded. Each one etched in bone and kept like a promise or a very patient diary. You find yourself wondering what kind of questions you'd ask if you lived here longer. Would they grow simpler over time, more specific? Would you stop asking about weather and start asking about yourself? You turn to the diviner. You believe they read these back, he shrugs. The ancestors, you nod. I think they remember, he says. Even if they don't read. You stand, stretch gently, and follow him out of the archive. The air outside has cooled, and the first few stars are beginning to show, shy, flickering things like the answers the bones sometimes won't give. The diviner returns the lantern to its hook and size. Not tired, just full. You sit beside the turtle again, who has now rotated a whole 30 degrees and seems pleased about it. You ever get tired of it? You ask. He doesn't answer right away. Then, no, not tired, just humbled, I ask the same questions every year. And still, the answers surprise me. You both sit there a while, the quiet settling around you like a soft blanket. One open question historians still wonder about. How much of this was truly belief, and how much was social ritual, a way to create order in uncertain times? Did everyone truly believe the shells cracked by divine instruction? Or was it sometimes just a way to say, we did our part, we asked. Now we move forward, either way it worked. The bones were cracked, the crops were planted, the prayers were made. You lean back and look up at the stars, letting your eyes soften until they blur into a quiet glow. And in that stillness, you feel something you can't quite name, like a presence, or maybe just a memory. You wake, not from sleep exactly, but from a kind of sitting dream, the kind where you're still awake but too calm to do much about it. The night has fully arrived, wrapping itself around the village like a wool blanket warmed by firelight. The moon hangs low and fat, a soft glowing coin resting in the dark palm of the sky. You're still sitting beside the turtle, who is now, miraculously, turned completely around and is facing the exact spot it began. A full revolution. No one applauds, but you feel like maybe they should. The diviner stands and stretches, joints popping softly like old wood floors in a quiet house. Come, he says, there's something we should do before the stars fade. You follow him again, past the workshop, past the low stone shrine, past a row of huts where lanterns flicker behind paper walls like fireflies caught in jars. The village is sleepy now, but not still. A few sounds linger, the clink of pottery being stacked, a baby murmuring in its sleep, the low hum of someone singing to themselves as they sweep. The diviner leads you to the record house. It's not grand. Just a long structure with stone steps and a roof so old it leans slightly to the right, like it's listening to the wind. Inside, it smells of ink, soot, and polished bamboo. Racks of oracle bones are stacked along the walls, bundled, labeled, archived like the dreams of centuries. He gives you a brush. You're going to help, he says, matter of fact. You look at him, then at the walls lined with quiet, you sit. He brings you a flat slip of bamboo and a dish of ink dark as river clay. Tonight's reading, he says. You remember the cracks clearly, the arc, the fork, the one that curled like a vine. You remember how your question felt, how the fire smelled, how the silence between each crack was somehow louder than the pop itself. You write slowly, not to be careful, just to savor it. While you write, he moves around the room, checking bundles, straightening scrolls, adding another record to the crops and clouds shelf. There's a rhythm to it, like folding laundry for the ancestors. You ever throw them away? You ask. He looks at you like you just suggested burning the moon. No, he says, even when they're wrong, especially when they're wrong, you wait. They tell us who we were when we asked, he explains. That matters, you nod, you get it. Some bones are so old the ink has faded. Others are cracked so deeply they've been reinforced with twine. A few are wrapped in cloth, marked with symbols you don't recognize. Perhaps they were special. Or maybe just extra confusing. You pause before one shelf with a label, dreams and strange laughter. You raise an eyebrow, he shrugs. Occasionally, people ask very specific things after very questionable snacks. You smile. And do the shells answer those too? Oh yes, he says, though the answers are usually more cryptic than helpful. One time we got 4 identical cracks and a burnt edge. I still don't know if that meant yes or just stop eating mushrooms you found in a goat pen. You file your finished slip into a woven envelope and set it into a row of others, marked with today's date and the question's symbol. The room is full of breathing, not from people, from memory. These bones have heard thousands of voices, some frantic, some hopeful, some laughing. Each question carved in hope, fear, or ritualized boredom. Each one preserved, you look up at the ceiling. It's made of wide bamboo slats that creak in the breeze, shifting ever so slightly as if the house itself is exhaling. I wonder, you say, if we're the only ones still asking. He looks at you sideways. Not a chance, he replies. Somewhere out there, someone is still heating a stick over fire and waiting for a turtle to give them the truth. He walks to a low cabinet and pulls out a final bundle. Inside are moon bones, cracked only during full moons, believed to give clearer answers, or at least prettier ones. He lets you hold one. The crack down its center is long and neat, shaped like a river. What was the question? You ask. He smiles. Same as always. Will the waters rise? You trace the line with your finger. Historians still wonder whether these archives, hundreds, maybe thousands of bones, were used more as spiritual tools or as early data collection. Patterns, predictions, seasonal memory, were they holy? Or were they early science dressed in reverence? Maybe both. You stand slowly. Your eyes are tired, but in that warm way, like being wrapped in steam after a cold day. The diviner walks you back out into the night. The moon is higher now, bolder. As if it has opinions, you return to the small turtle, still on its mat, looking entirely unimpressed with the flow of time. You crouch beside it and whisper, "Thanks for helping." It blinks. You pretend that's a nod. The diviner rests his hand on your shoulder. "Tomorrow there will be another shell," he says. "Another fire, another question." You nod. But you also know, quietly, deeply, that tonight's question is the one you'll remember, not because of the answer, but because you asked. Morning comes in through the trees like it's tiptoeing. The light is soft, pale, and kind, less like a sunrise, and more like someone gently pulling back the curtain on your dreams. You stir awake on a woven mat just inside the workshop, wrapped in a thin blanket that smells faintly of ash, ink, and herbs you can't name. You stretch, slowly, quietly, because even the birds aren't being loud yet. The turtle is still there, now fully asleep, head tucked in, legs splayed out like it just gave up on everything all at once. You resist the urge to pet it. The diviner is already up, of course. He sits cross-legged at the fire pit, sipping from a clay cup. There's steam, something vaguely bitter and root-like, and you're fairly sure it's tea, or the ancestor of tea, or possibly just boiled bark pretending. He gestures toward a second cup waiting for you. You accept it gratefully, even as your nose wrinkles. The first sip is confusing, then okay, then actually kind of nice. Your tongue is suspicious, but your stomach appreciates the warmth. "We should do one more today," he says, not looking at you. You pause. "Another shell," he nods. "This one's yours, but today's different," he says. You don't ask how, you just stand, stretch again, and start preparing. This time there's no ceremony to the setup, no slow introduction, no teaching moment, just motion, familiar, intimate. You gather the materials on your own, choose the shell, clean it, sand it. Carve the divots with steady hands. You ask your questions silently as you work, not aloud, not even in full sentences. It's just a feeling, a hum. Will it come? That's the shape of it. Will the rain arrive? Will the village be spared another dry season? Will the whisper in the clouds become water? The diviner watches you, not with judgment, but with that quiet attentiveness he's carried all along. Like a gardener waiting for the soil to decide it's ready, you press the poker to the shell. Crack, the first line splits in a straight line, decisive, immediate. You press again. Crack. This one curls, hesitant, a slow spiral like the steam rising from your cup. The third crack comes late, after the poker's heat has already faded, a delayed response. The fourth, you wait longer, heat the poker more slowly. Your hand steadies, you press gently, crack. A forked line, sharp and delicate. The shell is quiet after that, the room holds its breath. The diviner moves forward, takes the shell into his hands. He says nothing for a long time, then, "This one is yours to read." You blink. "Me," he nods. "You've seen enough. Try." You stare at the shell. It's warm in your palms. The cracks have meaning, you know that, not in words, but in shapes, feelings. You look at the straight line, the curl, the delay, the fork. "It will come," you say slowly. "But not today. And not from where we expect." He says nothing. You add, "There will be confusion." A pause, but then the river will speak. The words sound strange coming out, like they aren't yours, like they pass through you. The diviner smiles. "Good," you exhale. You didn't realize you were holding your breath. He turns and brings out a slip of bamboo. "Now write it down." You do. You record your first reading. It feels heavy, and write one crack in the shell, one line on the page. A connection traced slowly across time. You finish just as someone calls out from the village square. Not an alarm, not panic, just urgency. A farmer's voice pointing toward the horizon. You and the diviner step out of the workshop. In the distance, beyond the low hills, the sky is no longer soft. It's dark, not ominous, just thick with rain. You can smell it before you see it fully. That earthy, electric scent of wet things coming home. The villagers gather, quietly watching the storm approach. No one runs, no one shouts. They just stand together, eyes raised, mouths slightly open as if tasting the sky. The first drop hits your shoulder. Cool, heavy, real, then another, then more. Someone lets out a low, relieved laugh. Another lifts their arms to the sky. The children shriek, run barefoot into the fields, arms flung wide like birds who have been waiting to be taught how to fly. The old woman who sells herbs claps her hands once and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "About time." You glance at the diviner, he's watching you. The shell is still in your hands. You step into the rain and tilt your face upward. And as the rain soaks into your robe, into your skin, into the bones of the earth itself, you feel it, not power, not magic, just connection, between question and answer. Between earth and sky, between you and something older than words, the rain falls. And for the first time, it doesn't feel like weather, it feels like a response. The rain doesn't rush, it lingers. It falls in slow, deliberate rhythms, like it wants to be heard, not just felt. The ground soaks it up gratefully, darker and darker with each drop, until the clay paths ripple with puddles and the rooftops whisper with steady percussion. You're drenched, of course. But it doesn't matter. Your robe clings to you, heavy with water and history. Your hair is plastered to your forehead. The turtle, tucked safely under the awning, stares at you with that same unbothered neutrality. You give it a dripping thumbs up. It blinks, unimpressed. The diviner hasn't moved. He stands with the others, letting the rain wash over him like a second baptism. His arms are folded, his expression somewhere between amusement and pride. Children laugh and slip in the mud. A few of the older villagers begin collecting runoff water in bowls and jars, even as they smile through the downpour. One woman does a slow spin with her arms out. She's pretending not to dance, but she absolutely is. The questions have been answered for now. Later, of course, there will be new ones. There always are. But for this moment, there is only the soft roar of rain on reed roofs, the flicker of lanterns stubbornly glowing through the storm, and the gentle hush that wraps the village in peace. You step under the workshop's awning, water dripping from your sleeves, and sit beside the turtle, who is now facing a small beetle and contemplating murder or diplomacy. You sigh, content. The diviner joins you, offering a dry cloth that is only slightly more effective than using a leaf. "You did well," he says. You nod. "The shell was clear." "It was," he agrees, then adds, "but you were listening." You glance out at the village, now a sea of glistening rooftops and darting figures. The fields drink the water greedily. Somewhere near the edge of the village, someone has started playing a flute, off-key, a little slow, but full of joy. One open question still lingers. What made the Shang people believe so deeply in these cracks? Was it tradition, ritual, or a quiet understanding that every system, every empire, needs a language for uncertainty you'll never fully know, but you understand the feeling now, the power of asking, of listening, of watching the sky and letting it respond in its own way. The diviner reaches into his sleeve and pulls out something bundled in red cloth. He hands it to you. It's small, light. You unwrap it, a plastron, cleaned and sanded, its surface blank. "Ready for your next question," he says. You run your fingers along its smooth curve. The shell is cool. It fits perfectly in your palm. You don't say anything. You just hold it. You watch the rain fall. And slowly, like the world deciding to shift back into breath, the village begins to move again. Carts are pulled into storage. Cloaks are shaken out. Wet braids are wrung dry. But the mood is still soft, gentle. Satisfied, you and the diviner return to the workshop. Inside, the coals have gone completely out. He doesn't relight them. Some fires are meant to go quiet. You help him organize the tools. Wrap the bones, store the ink stones. It feels less like cleaning and more like closing a book, the kind with no ending, just many pages left unread. The turtle is placed gently in a shallow dish of water, where it seems vaguely pleased. You rest for a while, not sleeping, not quite. Just letting your eyes close and the weight of the day drift to the edges of your awareness. When you leave, the diviner doesn't say goodbye. He just nods, you nod back, and as you walk slowly down the now slick path out of the village, you feel the turtle shell still wrapped in your bag. Light. Real, a reminder that you asked something, and were willing to wait for the reply. You take one last look over your shoulder. The workshop glows faintly behind you, tucked under mist and reed and memory. Then it vanishes into the rain, and you walk forward, not because you have all the answers, but because now you know how to ask. You're safe now. Still, the rain has passed, leaving only its breath behind in the cool evening air. Your body is soft with warmth and memory. Your mind gently echoing with firelight and footsteps and the sound of a shell splitting open to tell its quiet truth. There is nothing left to do now. No more questions tonight. Only the comfort of knowing you once walked barefoot on wet clay, carried a turtle shell with care, and sat with someone who understood that even uncertain answers are worth listening to. Let your shoulders ease. Let your breath stretch just a little longer. The bones are silent now, stacked neatly in the dark. The ink is dry. The village sleeps beneath reed roofs, with the river whispering softly as it passes in the distance, and you rest beneath a sky still full of old stars, the kind that never had to crack to be believed. You are warm. You are quiet. You are part of a story that was always waiting for you, so breathe in gently, exhale slowly, and let the world dim around you, soft and wide. Let your thoughts slip into stillness, like a turtle sinking beneath the surface of calm water. There is no need to ask again. The answer has already found you. End of script. Sweet dreams.